What's up, PowerAppers? Today I've got two things for you in the video. The first is a rockin' guitar riff. Do you know what song that's from? Leave it in the comments. The other thing that I've got is a rockin' new feature from the PowerApps team. This feature allows you to write to Azure App Insights without writing any custom code. The feature is kind of near and dear to me because I've done a couple episodes and talked to conferences about this thing before, and now it just got way easier. So let's get started and learn the easy way to log PowerApps telemetry and errors to Azure Application Insights. Thanks for watching. Before I show you the new pattern, I'm going to take you on a little tour of how this has evolved and the other options you have besides the out-of-the-box way to log with App Insights. So the first time that I started working with this pattern was last year, and that's when I created this video you see on the screen here of PowerApps logging and telemetry. And in that video, I demonstrated a couple different patterns of how you could use flow through a Power App to flow to Azure Functions and an App Insights or a custom connector. And I created a sample Power App as well as Azure Functions, and then enhanced this even more and presented it at Microsoft Ignite. You can watch that one here. And again, you can see here were the two different patterns that I showed. A Power App either calling a flow, which in turn calls a custom connector, or calling a custom connector directly. The connector invokes Azure Functions, which then call track event, track exception, or track page view inside of Application Insights via its .NET SDK. The other option was without the custom connector. Well, these options, in the one on the left we saw there included, these are the Azure functions here. And so this repo where I put these Azure functions allow you to implement the pattern you see here with these Azure functions. And so that required deploying this custom code from the Azure functions back here. There's really just two classes of code, but either way you had to write custom code like this, as you can see, to log data to App Insights. So then that was real nice and it worked real good, but now it just got way easier. So check it out. Now this blog post is announced by Angus, and this is exciting to see that he's got this rolled out, and we got to chat about it down at Ignite. So nice to see it come out now and be able to use. And so as soon as I saw it come out, I was excited to check it out. And Charles Sterling, Chuck, who, you know, he's always on every month with me on the PowerApps community call, having fun, meeting people from the community there. He put out this video and this blog post here, which shows you how to use it from that really getting started level. How do you make an App Insights instance inside of Azure? And then after you've made that instance, how do you hook it up to the Power App? I'll show you that in just a second. And then he goes on and he shows how you can make these smiley faces trace to App Insights to say, does someone like the app or not? And then he uses Power BI at the very end actually to make a report and actually visualize that information. So it's really cool, and he takes it end to end. What I'm going to do, which is different than his video, is I'm going to deep dive on all the different capabilities of what the trace capability offers us with this and how that differs from the things you can do if you decide to make your own Azure functions. I can only think of maybe a couple use cases where Azure Functions makes more sense, but I'd like to show you all the options one way or the other so you know what you can choose from. So that brings us over to the error handling Power App. And, you know, if you come to this Azure App Insights, Azure Function repo here in GitHub, back in the very start of the repo, you can get videos, links to all these videos, and I'll put these all in the chat. You can download from these different videos to this Power App right here. And this Power App is just my test Power App I use in all these error handling and logging videos. And so I continue to just enhance it because this capability fits right in. And so essentially what I did in a nutshell, which Chuck walks through step by step in his videos, I come into Azure and I make an Application Insights instance, as you can see, and I name this one AI from PowerApp. And after you make this in Azure, you're going to copy this thing called the instrumentation key. And after you copy that, you're going to come back into the PowerApp that you want to instrument. You are going to open up your tree view, pick the app node, and after you have the app object over in the property pane, you're going to come over here and you're going to paste that in there. I just pasted the same exact one in there, but yours is going to start out blank. Now, a couple things to note about this right here. If we look at my Power App, and if you've seen my other videos in this series about this stuff, you'll notice that I have these text boxes where I was actually writing App Insights and I'm putting in the instrumentation key for different instances of App Insights I have here. And so then I was reusing that instrumentation key, kind of like setting it as a config value here, if you would, throughout my app. So then I tried to do that same thing here. I put in my little text box. I put in my instrumentation key. This is actually one I started with earlier today, but as you'll see, I'm not able to use it in the way I thought I was. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to reference this text property, which is the default property for that control. And I wanted to be able to reference that from over here in this variable. But I have not found a way to set this variable programmatically. I tried putting code in here to set it and reference that value programmatically, but it did not work. It said it could not find that instrumentation key. And so I've only found that the only way I can set it is to put it in here for now. So that's just one thing to point out about that. Maybe that'll change so we can do it more programmatically in the future. Okay, so the next thing is after you've got that in there, what you need to do is you need to save and publish your app. Then you need to consider something else. If I hit play here and I do things which are supposed to use this instrumentation key to collect telemetry and log things in my app, it's not going to work while I'm in the designer. It's not designed to. So you have to, like I said, save and publish your Power App, and then you can open your Power App in the play mode like I've done here, and now it will be instrumented. So if I refresh my page here and I load this same Power App, if you've seen my other video, what you'll know about my error handling pattern here is when I click Create Global Error, that's going to set a Boolean variable which causes this toggle control to trigger. And when that toggle control triggers based on that global variable I set, that Boolean variable, the code in onCheck will fire. The code in the onCheck event associated with this toggle control is then going to invoke Azure Application Insights and log something. So I will show you the code here in a bit, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an error. It gets added to my errors collection, then I log it to App Insights. I'm also going to create a context error which reacts off this toggle control over here and logs something to App Insights. And then I can also clear both of these errors. If you want to learn more about that pattern, go see those other videos, and I'll put a little pop-up here so you can find that. The other thing that I want to point out is I actually have a little check down here, a little toggle. Do I want to send the data App Insights or not? So actually what I'm going to do is turn that on, and then I'm going to toggle both of those things to happen. And now that data actually got logged App Insights. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this thing called trace severity. And trace severity, we can use this to log and categorize the information we logged App Insights. So if I click information, warning, error, critical, in all four cases, I just ran some code that uses this new out-of-the-box capability to write App Insights with these four different categories or levels of the severity that I'm writing this information with. So When I'm done with that, my traces are going to appear in two spots. The first one is this AI from the Power App. And the second one is where I already had things built into my app that's going to write to this one, the AI from the connector. That was that pattern that I demonstrated in this section here, where the custom connector flows through the Azure function in order to write to App Insights. So in just a bit, that data is going to pop up in this location. And it takes a few minutes. I've seen it go as fast as 2 minutes. Let's see, 1:10, it's actually 1:13 on my computer clock right now. So this is basically the trace information you're seeing starting here when I started this video and I opened the app. This app started the home screen page view, and this trace right here of what browser I had were all out of the box, and I didn't write any code to make them occur. As we bounce back to the Power App and we start taking a look at the code now, let's take a look at the simple case on what this one looks like. So first thing I do is I say, is reporting App Insights enabled? And this is this toggle app insights.value. Well, you may be wondering, where is that set? You saw me set it before, but you probably didn't know I did it. See the green underline here and here? That's this control. So when I turned App Insights on, this is true, and therefore I'm going to log to App Insights. So this function right here called trace, this is your friend, your out-of-the-box function to write to App Insights. You just open up the trace function, and inside of it, the first thing you're going to put in is the information to be traced, it says, the message argument. Here, I'm passing in a variable called GBL screen. It's a global variable I set on this apps on start. You can learn more about all these variables I'm using here in the other videos about my error handling pattern. You can see its current value is home screen, and that correlates to what we see in the tree view right here. The other thing that you'll notice is, so this first argument is home screen dash, and then I'm just saying trace severity.information example. And so that is so I can point out what this next argument does here. This one is the severity. So it allows you to pick from 4 different values, as you can see down here: information, critical, error, and warning. And so in this one, I'm just showing how do we do the information one. Then you pass into there a custom record. And so here, what I'm passing in is several properties. I'm again passing in my message. Where did it come from? I made a correlation ID. As you'll see in my other error handling video, I talk about how that can be important. I do not see this as important when you're using the out-of-the-box trace function, because it's actually holding on to your session ID, as you'll see under the hood. So this one is definitely not really needed. This one I don't think is needed anymore either, compared to the raw pattern I used with the Azure Functions, because App Insights is also grabbing a hold of which Power App this came from by default. So like all these things right here, these three, they could probably not even be put in here, but I put them in there, as you'll see, for consistency's sake, where I do it in the event handler, my toggle button, to log the same thing 2 different ways, with the custom pattern as well as with this new out-of-the-box pattern. So I pass in all this information that tells me more, and I mark it as information here. My other buttons do much the same thing. In fact, they're exactly the same. The only difference is I change out the type here. This is trace severity.warning, and I change the verbiage from information to warning everywhere. I do the same thing here for error and critical. And so that basically just used, again, this trace function that logged to App Insights. So the other place I talked about that I logged App Insights is this onCheck function. And in here, the old pattern that I used when I wrote through my connector was, this was my connector name, and then this was the function equal to the name of my Azure function that I deployed. And notice I'm passing in that same stuff. Now, the new way to do it in the exact same spot when one of these global errors gets triggered in my app is use the out-of-the-box function. So as you'll notice as you look at the two, I made them identical. into what I'm passing in both places. Notice I don't have to pass in my instrumentation key to the trace function because I've already defined that up here on my app level, and it takes care of it for me. So now I think enough time's gone by that I can come back here and refresh, and we should see this number go up, I think, from 23. There we go. So these are all the events that occurred as I just used this app on the demo. So let's go back to where we started. I started the app. This is app started. This got written without me writing code. Home screen, page view. Didn't write any code, or I did write code for that one. The trace right here, I did not write any code. We saw that, and here we go. Home screen, we have a problem. This trace right here got written when I clicked that create global error, and this onCheck function got fired. So the code that wrote that into App Insights was this right here. So let's take a look at what that looks like again. So there's our trace function, and we can see it says trace right here. And it's the same information. Home screen, we have a problem. Then I triggered another error, right? I triggered that error by clicking that context error button over here. And when that error got handled, this is the function that wrote that. It's the same function, I'm just slightly different arguments on passing a different error message in. So if we take a look at that one, we can see the severity level was error, even though it's called a trace here, and not found got written. Then here are the 4 buttons I clicked. Severity level informational, warning, error, and critical. Those 4 equate to me coming down and clicking this button, then that one, then that one. And so that's what that looks like when you write it in here. So I also want to show you what it looks like when we're writing this with the pattern that I showed before in my other videos about using an Azure function. And so here, if we refresh into our Azure function, we can see that I have a little bit more control. I logged that home screen, we have a problem, and look, I made it the type of exception. It's not written as a trace. In fact, there's no traces written here. That's the main difference. When you're writing with the out-of-the-box capability, everything is written in as a trace, and you have different levels of severity. And then you can use properties you put in that trace to categorize that information as well. However, when you're using Azure Functions, you have more control over the categories that are getting put into App Insights here. So you can see I'm running events to say, for example, I clicked a button. And I have exceptions that report my problem. So here's that home screen, we have a problem exception here. And in the out-of-the-box way, this is what it looks like. In both cases, you have your data here in App Insights. It's just it's classified as a different event type. Now here's something else that's really cool. If you click on this now and you start tracing what happened, when it was written as a trace to App Insights, this becomes very useful though. Look at this timeline. The timeline I can basically trace from the user's session. The user started in the app. This was on start method fired. See, I talked about that session ID, how you kind of don't need that correlation ID anymore. App ID and app name are undefined at that point. App starts, they're undefined still. So actually, maybe it would be a good idea to log those, even though I thought that they were optional now. So then here's the home screen gets displayed, and that's where I live. It knows. And it says, here's the page view URL, how long it took to do the page. And I can just keep tracing all the way through here. And then here's where I clicked the error, and I triggered the error handling, and I wrote that with the trace function. And here's those custom properties I passed in. My correlation ID, the environment, the app name, the message, the source. Isn't that all good stuff? Look, the out-of-the-box app name is undefined. So it is a good reason I passed it in myself. And basically, I can watch the entire path here of every click in the order that the user did it through my app. So as you can see, there is a difference on how the data gets logged. I'm not sure if it's super important for you to log it as all traces like this versus exceptions like this. And one other thing I'd like to point out about this approach is it's still traceable all the way through. You can go to a correlation ID and pick filter by that correlation ID, and you're also able to see everything that was logged and happened throughout the course of the app by doing it that way too. So it's not like this capability here to look at the timeline is not possible when you write it on your own. It's just not wired up into this out-of-the-box UI automatically. You just have to filter by the correlation ID. So that is a little demo on why this feature rocks, because before you had to deploy all the Azure functions, you had to write all the Azure code, you had to create a custom connector or call it via a flow, and now all you simply have to do is go to the app object, put in your instrumentation key, and then somewhere inside of your app, call that trace function like you saw right here, and you're logging straight to App Insights. So Angus team, thanks for making this one. We really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching the video. I hope you got a lot out of it and it helps you out. If you'd like to work together on some PowerApps or anything else sometime, hit me up on canvas.com. I work with folks I meet on YouTube all the time. And if you'd like to see some more PowerApps videos, check them out here on my channel. I'll see you next time.